So in my last video, I kind of used AI to build out this editable content area. And one of the questions that I got, and I've actually gotten this question on a lot of videos, is if you are a beginner trying to learn how to code, when should you actually use AI versus when will AI stunt your growth as a developer? So answering this question isn't really black and white. I think it's more of a gray area, and it really depends on your needs and your project needs. And if you're doing vibe coding or AI assisted coding in a work environment, sometimes you don't want to reach for AI and sometimes you do. So let's kind of talk about it, and hopefully you guys can, and like always, if you have a different opinion, leave a comment below on this video so we can all kind of discuss what are the best ways and when you should and shouldn't use AI. Okay, so going back to my example, we have this little paragraph tag. When you hover over it, it shows a little click to edit, and then I click it and it switches over to a edit mode, and then it has a cancel and a save button. I can go ahead and just write some message here, and I can go ahead and save that content. It saves it, shows a little toast, and then we get the actual message that shows up over here. Now, I will say I used AI exclusively. I used 100% vibe coding basically to implement this and fix bugs along the way. But the reason I did that is because I know how to implement all this stuff myself. I have done it over the years multiple times. For example, let's break down the problem and actually understand what do you need to know in terms of Tailwind CSS, React, backend logic to actually implement this type of component. So the first thing is we have some type of paragraph tag, right? If you hover over it, we show a border and we show this label. That's something that you could easily implement in Tailwind. So you have a grouping on a paragraph tag, and on hover of the group, you then display some type of label inside of this thing. And you also only show this if we are an admin. So if I log out and log back in as someone who's not an admin, all this functionality will not show up. So to implement this functionality alone, I already know I know how to do this, right? I'm confident 100% I can build this. And if I go and look at the code, it turns out that a lot of things I mentioned are exactly how it was implemented from AI. We have a Tailwind group, and that group is going to automatically show this thing, this little click to edit button, when I hover over the group. And then of course there's a bunch of styling. How do I get this label to be in the top right of the corner? Well, you can give it an absolute, and then you can give the parent thing some type of relative, and then I can position it to the right and to the top. So all these things, easy. So now that I'm confident I could actually implement this, when you click on this, how does that get implemented in React? I'm assuming that there's some type of state variable that needs to toggle between an edit mode and a preview mode. So if I click it, I'm guessing there's a state variable. So again, all this code AI wrote for me. So I'm going to go up to the top and look over here. There is a Boolean that says set is editing, which is a true or false. So if I look at where this is used in this component, you'll see I have an is editing div and I have a non is editing div. So again, my assumption is correct. There's probably some type of state Boolean that's toggling to show either this tip tap rich text editor, or we showed the actual just preview mode. And then of course, if you're not an admin, we have this block of code that just shows the HTML without all this admin related features. So again, the tip tap editor, this is something I've used on multiple projects and I've implemented this from scratch. I know how it kind of works. I can go to the docs and relearn it real quick. It's just a matter of importing a toolbar, adding these buttons, adding the panel for actual typing, and then down at the bottom we have a cancel button, which I'm assuming when you click it, it has to basically reset the changes that you made. And typically the way you implement this type of logic in React is you'll have another state variable to track what the user has currently typed, but then you also have the default initial state somewhere so that when they click cancel, it just reverts it back to what it was. Okay, so let's double check the code and see if they're doing that somewhere. Let's find the cancel button. It says editor commands set content. So content, this is what the original string value was that was fetched back from the database. And so it makes sense that when you click on cancel, all it's doing is reverting the editor back to the original content. But then also when you save, I'm guessing, let me just find handle save, here it is. We get the HTML from the editor itself, and then that's what we send to the backend to persist it. Again, this is stuff that I can implement myself, and I know with confidence I can do so. And when you feel confident in that, I would say that you should be able to use AI. So let's just say, when should you use AI? And then the first thing I'm going to go ahead and say, which I've been rambling for 5 minutes, is when you know you can implement it yourself. This is probably the most important one, because when you know you can implement it yourself, it's just going to take you more time to type it. I would say leverage AI, whether that's using the AI typing agents, using the chat feature, or using some type of Command K feature, whatever. Just If you know you can implement it yourself, write out the high level design of what you need, all the interactivity and the features that you need, and just let AI do it for you. All right, so does that make sense? When you know you can implement it yourself, and if you're a beginner, you probably don't know how to implement any of this stuff yourself, which you can still use AI, but I would say every piece of code AI generates, you should read over it. You should understand what it's doing. If it's generating some CSS Tailwind groups, you should understand how Tailwind grouping works. If it's generating some state variables, you should probably understand how that state works and how it's integrated with this component. And also, like if it brings in some type of rich text editor, you should understand the implications of that. For example, we have this TipTap rich text editor, and it's going to actually send over HTML to my backend, which if you're not experienced, you may not even double check the code. But when I was using AI to generate this, I noticed that it wasn't sanitizing the HTML that came from the front end, which can be very, very dangerous. This could be a huge security risk if you don't sanitize. And so what I did is I read through the code, because you should always read through the code AI generates. And then I saw that it wasn't sanitizing anything. So I brought in this sanitize HTML library, and then I'm passing whatever the user typed into the front end. I'm sanitizing it before I store it to my backend, right? Because in this about page, there's a dangerously set inner HTML, which is a red flag that you should be sanitizing what you're storing into the database. Okay, so you're not going to learn that stuff unless you actually start implementing stuff yourself. So yeah, don't just blindly accept code. Let's move on to another example about when you should use AI versus when you should probably just learn the code and do it yourself. Okay, so here's a 2D zombie game that I worked on at the beginning of the year on my channel. And I will say that a lot of the core logic of this game, I spent a lot of time reading through the code, making sure it seemed like it was performant, making sure that it seemed like it was maintainable, and I could abstract things and easily add in new enemies or add in new items, which leads me to my next point of when the feature or code isn't core logic. So what do I mean by core logic? In this game, when you're building out a game engine, you need to make sure that your engine is performant. You need to make sure it's modular, it's abstracted in the right way. And if you just let AI kind of slap stuff together, you're going to end up getting a lot of poor performing code that just doesn't seem like it works very well. And so although you can use AI to implement most of everything, it's still good to slow down and make sure that you truly understand how it's working and to stop things and refactor things along the way so that you have some type of design that's actually performant. And it's going to be able to handle all the zombies you have in the game. It's going to be able to handle all the players you have in the game. But there's certain things in this application that I just added in, like this mini map. I'm pretty sure I just vibe coded this because I don't think it's core logic to the game. Like it's just a little side thing. It's a mini map. Who cares? You just need to draw a 2D grid with some color dots. That's super easy to do. It would have taken me more time to do it from scratch than me just asking AI to do it. All the toolbars in the top left, the top right, and the inventory system, again, those being displayed in the UI is not something that I want to spend my time on because I don't think it's core system logic. Like even if the inventory is not really performant, I don't think it's going to slow down the entire game because I have 8 items in inventory. Now, if you see the enemies running around, the algorithm I used, again, I just used AI to bring in the algorithm. It's an A-star algorithm, right? So I gave it a 2D grid of all the walkable locations and the non-walkable locations. And then I gave it a zombie, and then I gave it the player position. And basically, AI just generated a whole function first go, and it was able to implement the A-star algorithm to take that zombie and have it make a path to try to find my player. And eventually, when I get close enough, it'll attack the player. Okay, so again, going back to my point, when the feature or code isn't core logic. You know, I am going to rename this title, When Should You Let AI Write Your Code? That's what I'm going to go ahead and say. I think this will be able to generate more talking points. So let me go ahead and add another one. I kind of talked about this in the first one when I did the web application. I'm going to say when the security concerns are lower. And again, this could involve the game. It's super low security because I don't care if people hack my game. Like it was just for fun. It's a side project. Same thing with my writing platform. There's certain things in this that I need to make sure are secure. Like for example, when an admin wants to edit a book, I need to make sure the backend checks that the user making the request is an admin and they have access. But that doesn't mean that I don't use AI to generate the code. It just means that I'm going to include context to say, hey, double check you have an is admin middleware check. And then when the code is generated, I'm going to read through it and make sure that I'm checking all the security concerns in my head, right? So like, I want to make sure that the endpoint's protected. I want to make sure that the HTML I'm saving is sanitized. Okay, so the lower the security concerns are with the code, I would say, yeah, you could probably just let AI generate the code. Now, another thing that I kind of mentioned in the game example is when the algorithm is well known. For example, when I talked about the A-star algorithm for the pathfinding, this is something that's been solved for like decades, right? People have been solving and implementing algorithms for games. We have breadth first search, depth first search, A-star algorithms. We have like all this 3D logic. And if it's a well-known algorithm, as long as you understand like the high level idea about what it does. For example, before you just let AI generate an A-star algorithm, probably read through the Wikipedia page, or at least look at this example of how it kind of works and how it spreads out across your grid to find the best path. I believe it's trying to get down here or something. So you'll see how the logic kind of works visually. And of course, you could probably try to read through this code and truly understand what it's doing. But in my case, I didn't really care about knowing this algorithm because I have done a bunch of stuff in college about learning these algorithms. I know I can learn it. It will just take me a couple of hours or maybe a day or two to truly understand and grasp how to do this. And then getting to write it by hand from scratch, again, would just take me more time. But I'm confident I could do it, right? I've learned hard stuff in my career. And wasting a bunch of time trying to implement this from scratch just to show people I've done it is not important to me. I'd rather just have AI plop down an algorithm that's already fine-tuned to work with the game that I'm building and then move on. I'm going to do one last bullet point. For the last one I'm going to do is when you have a solid foundation in your code base already. Okay, now what do I mean by this? So for example, I have various starter kits, like I have a Next.js starter kit, I have a TanStack Start starter kit, and it has like the front end code and the back end code and the validation and the middleware and all this authentication stuff already baked into it. And the code is written in a way that I have personally gone through and made sure I have certain layers of abstraction set up in my code base already. And this can be applied to the game example as well. Like when you have a solid foundation, whether that be a game engine or some type of inventory system or like an AI pathfinding system, if you already have a solid foundation in your code base that you have double checked and you have written by hand, or you started with a existing project that you know is pretty good, I think you can let AI to write more of your code, because when you use something like Cursor or other IDEs, it actually indexes all of your code and it has good examples to kind of build upon. I have found that AI works the best when you have an existing project that's already kind of like well designed and you understand how you want to do your modals and your pop-ups and your toasts and how you want to do your forms and your form validation on the client side and how you want to do your authentication checks on your backend. Are you using a REST API? Are you using some type of server actions? So making sure all that stuff is set up from the get-go is just going to allow me to be more confident letting AI write all the code for me, because I know it's going to use examples that I have already personally reviewed and I approve of. And then additionally, make sure that you have cursor rules. So like whatever framework or library that you're using, come through here and add in rules to make sure that the AI is going to do stuff correctly the first time. So that's what I do with TanStack Start. I have examples of how you do server functions. How do you do authenticated server functions? How do I do validators on these server functions? So although you can index docs with Cursor and it's supposed to be able to understand the docs, I have found that just having cursor rules and add stuff in here every time AI messes up so that it has better context can just make it more reliable to let AI generate your code. All right, so those are the 5 times I think you should let AI just write your code. Again, if you're a beginner, the goal is you need to understand how this code works. Like spend the time, regardless if it takes you a whole day to read through functions and understand it, because all the code AI is generating, eventually you'll have to come through and you may have to tweak it. Until we get to the point where AI is doing like coding 100% correct every time, even if it's a 90% chance of getting it right, but a 10% chance of getting it wrong, in the off chance you get a 10% wrong output and you keep reprompting it and it just cannot get it correct, you may be stuck in the water. Like you could probably keep prompting stuff over and over again. And I've done that on this channel. Like I have prompted something up to like 16 times. So to give you a good example of when like you just keep reprompting AI, on this beginner React challenges site that I have, I made this like cool 3D background effect. I think this took me like 16 different prompts. Like I vibe coded this from start to finish, and I had to keep reprompting it because it kept on messing up. But eventually, without even understanding the code, you can get it to work kind of how you need it to. But honestly, I don't think that's how it's going to work out every time. Eventually, you're going to hit a roadblock and you have to dive into the code. You have to understand what it's doing. Why is the AI keep generating the wrong stuff, so that you can kind of tweak your prompting to give it more low-level navigation so it can be successful when it's generating your code. Anyway, I've been rambling for a while. So remember, leave a comment below if there are other times that you think you should just let AI write your code versus when you should actually do it yourself. These are the ones I came up with, but I'd be curious to hear what you all think below. Have a good day and happy coding.